This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, school success makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend out of the great state of Florida, Dana James, who is the head of school of Seven Rivers Christian School in Lecanto, Florida. And of course, those that have been listening for a while, you know that I also live in Florida. Him and I are completely across the state from each other, but I love the good old state of Florida. It's beautiful weather and a whole bunch of other things that we love here too. So I'm sure we'll maybe able to jump into that for a little bit as well. But before we jump into all things school, because we got a really fun episode for you guys today, I am going to pass it off to Dana to introduce himself. So Dana, welcome to the podcast today, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, as I go into talking about school growth, it's probably helpful to sort of, let me tell you quickly my journey. I've been an educator for 45 years. And the first 15 of those, I was a public school teacher, teaching math and coaching at Oconee County High School in Watkinsville, Georgia. That's where the Georgia accent comes from. And my wife helped start a Christian school in our area. And so about 7 years of their existence, they sort of talked me into leaving my job at Oconee and going to Westminster Christian Academy in Watkinsville, Georgia. And when I got there were about 130 kids, and they went up to 10th grade. And over the next 14 years, I would get to figuratively and literally build a school. And so we built a company, bought land and built a complex and built a school and grew it to about 340 kids. And then in 2008, when the housing bubble hit in our area in Georgia, it hit pretty hard. And at that time, Seven Rivers Christian School in Florida, sort of pursued me and asked if I'd be interested in being the head of school here. And it was a good time, for me to make the transition. So I moved down to Florida. And, we were about 330 kids in the middle of that struggling time in 2010. And today we're right at 700. And so I've got a chance to really see two schools sort of grow from small times and small schools into larger schools. And learned a lot in the process. And the truth is that if I'm honest, there's a lot of reasons the schools grow that have nothing to do with the head of school. There's nothing genius you did. Sometimes it's just economic circumstances. In Florida, as you know, Mitchell, the state has a voucher program. And so every student that wants to go in private school in Florida can qualify for a state voucher, which pays a pretty significant portion of their tuition. And so money no longer is a problem. And so you grow for those reasons. You have nothing to do with it. You grow because, you just live in a community that's growing and you've got a lot of people coming in. Maybe you have a successful athletic program, maybe you have good academics. There are just things going on, and the reasons you grow that are or are not beyond your control. I think the other thing is that there are reasons you don't grow that may or may not be in your like you might have a poor economy, or maybe you're in an area with a lot of local competition, which is very common in urban areas where they have private schools, a lot of competition. Maybe you lost a program at Westminster, Watkinsville. One year we lost our football team because we didn't have enough numbers, and that had a real impact on our school because kids left and went to other places so they could play football. Transitional leadership is probably the biggest thing, and I'll talk more about that when we get to it. And one of the things that I've always sort of pushed against is that people say, "Oh, we're the best kept secret in the area." And I kind of think, I don't know that it's the purpose of a school or a ministry or a church or anything to be a best kept secret. I think God has called us to go out into the world and make disciples, and that's a public, intentional thing, not a secret thing. And so there are reasons why they grow. So I really started studying this, and I felt like if you're going to grow as a school, then there are four things that have to be true. In other words, you may or may not grow through circumstances, but there are four things that have to be true. And I feel like if these four things aren't true, then you might not grow because of faults of your own. In other words, decisions you're making, things you're doing that that retard or inhibit your growth when you could be growing, but you don't have these things in place. And so I sort of narrowed it down to four things that I thought were very important to every school. And one of them, in all honesty, sounds so 90s, and that is you have to have a clear mission and vision. It's almost like you have to have a mission statement. You have to know what you're doing. And I know that sounds so 90s, but in the world of Christian education, there's when you start a Christian school, you started for a reason. You said, why do we want to start this? Our church I'm at, they started a Christian school because they really wanted to continue their ministry outside of the church walls on Sundays. And they felt like it was very important to educate children and to offer them an education with a biblical worldview. So they had the reason behind it. And I feel like it's very important that as a school, you have to understand what's your mission and vision. Why do you come to work every day? What's the point here? Because sometimes in Christian education, we just think it's about evangelism. We're just trying to lead people to Christ. And sometimes we just think it's just about academics. We're trying to provide a great education to a group of people to flourish, for the next generation. And sometimes those things can take in directions that are contrary to what we call mission drift. That idea. So you have to have that. You have to have, and they should guide your thinking. In our school, we developed a mission statement like everybody else in the 90s, and we had to redevelop it, and we had to redo it. And the one we came up with about a dozen years ago is a mission statement that really, which I say I can teach from it. So when I'm trying to help parents understand what we accomplish as a school, when I'm trying to help teachers understand, when I'm working through when I'm inducting new staff, I start with our mission statement and the 5 parts we have into it, which is we partner with parents, we're distinctly biblical, we care about academic rigor, artistic beauty, and athletic competition. And so I can talk about all 5 of those elements. And then every decision we make in a school, there's questions get asked. Does this promote academic rigor? Is this healthy from an arts point of view? Is this helping our athletic program? Are we partnering with parents? Is this distinctly biblical? And so as you're making decisions, as a framework, you're making decisions in, and it keeps you from drifting away from what matters. And I feel like a lot of schools, unfortunately, they just go into it with really no real vision of why we're doing this. And I feel like my job, honestly, to my board and to my staff and to my leadership team, is to constantly remind people why we're doing this and what are we doing. And so even just recently, just this year, I've been walking through our teaching staff with 3 talks. And one is, I call it doing ministry. And I want teachers to understand that they are doing ministry. So you're out there, you're teaching reading to kindergartners, or you're teaching algebra to 8th graders, or you're teaching a research paper to juniors. In every way, you're doing ministry because you're teaching truth to the next generation. And it's important. So I want them to see themselves as ministers. The second thing I want teachers to do is see themselves as leaders, because not just in the student's life, but really with the parents, to see themselves as experts who are good at what they do and see themselves as leaders. And the third talk I've been having is what does grace look like in the classroom? And because there's a real, sort of what is grace? Grace, unfortunately, is often defined as the absence of discipline, because that's really sort of the message of justification. But, what does grace look like in the classroom? So, even now I'm trying to wade into it all the time of what is our mission? What is our vision? Why are we doing this? And just keep it constant. So you have to have a clear mission. You have to have a clear vision. Those things matter.
I love that you bring this up because and multiple school leaders we've had on the podcast, that you're right with like, oh, it's very 90s. Like people have been talking about it for so long. But it's funny, it's one of those things that's talked about so much, but is also, I think, one of the things that's missed the most as well. And you talk about mission drift and all these different things. And the saying that came to me as you were talking, it was either like Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or together the two. I Googled it while you're talking because it reminded me of it. And it says Jeff Bezos here, like one of the quotes says, the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. And so I kind of associate that with a school of like, there's nothing short of opportunities everywhere. I mean, we could build an athletic building. We could add this. We could hire these people. We could try and gain our, grow tuition or grow our student body. You know, like there's all these opportunities everywhere, but is it going to be the thing that makes you fall? Like if you can be successful, but man, you got to be able to say no to all these things that come through.
Education is the most knee-jerk profession in America. You know, if somebody came along and said, you know, I've learned that if you stand on one foot while you're teaching a kid reading, they learn better. You'd have the entire school standing on one foot because, oh, somebody said it. And we're just a knee-jerk profession. And so because we're those things, it's very important so that while you're doing this, and so that when somebody comes along and says, hey, stand on one foot and everybody learns how to read, you're like, no, that's probably not how it works. And I think that's a big deal. We're just such a knee-jerk profession. And so vision and vision really.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple of years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours. Free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. So for a school listening and going, all right, I've heard this talked about so many times, I need to finally do it. What do you recommend? They just get together with their employees, their like all the teachers, or their board, or they take a class?
I took the school leadership team, which is, you know, basically our principals and athletic director and, you know, instructional specialist, and then invited our pastors, because we're a church-owned school, invited our pastors in. And so we sort of wrote an initial statement, and then it began to just bounce around, because now an email, something can bounce around real easily and bounce around the pastors. And they would tweet things from a church point of view, and we would tweet things from a school point of view. And we finally got there, and it went through, and this is good. This is good. It probably took 4 months to write the thing. Wow. It wasn't 4 hours in a room. It was 4 months. It was digesting it. We'd go back and forth. So they would tweak this word, tweak that word. And then when we finally got to the one we liked, you know, that was about 12 years ago, everybody went, yes. And then we never changed it. And today it is the foundation of our decision making. And I can hear teachers talking about it. I can hear principals, you know, going through and talking about, you know, why do fine arts matter? Why is our athletic program important? What does it mean to be rigorous in academics? You know, partnering with parents, which is a big deal in the private school world, because, you know, we see parents as an integral part of the whole process. I mean, they matter. And then being distinctly biblical. Sometimes I call it being unapologetically Christian. So I want people to see that, you know, here we are. And so if you're doing something that starts to go outside of that template, then that's when the no comes up. No, maybe not. And it helps, because we'll have parents come in and ask us to do X or Y, or why don't you do this? Or even in our case, why don't you do more, you know, sort of vocational work? Why don't you do vocation? And so we're able to say, well, we're a liberal arts school because of the body, mind, soul, academics, arts, athletics. We're a liberal arts school. That's what we're going to be able to offer. And we feel like somebody wants to be a great plumber, they can be a great plumber with a great liberal arts education from our school and go out there and do a wonderful job. So it helps us to really know ourselves well.
It helps them get off your back about it too on things.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you were just to come in and say, we want this, why don't we have this? Well, I guess we should, I guess we'll look at it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we have a reason,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I know that was the first one that you had. There was a second one of the four.
Second one is a passionate, committed staff. In my former life, as a young educator, I had to have a summer job, and my summer job was a painter, and then I eventually ended up building houses. And I remember telling I hired a painter one time. I remember telling a painter, his name was Harold, and I said, Harold, your paint job is only as good as the worst painter in your crew. I said, the worst painter in your crew is the one who makes you look bad. And so you need to figure out who that guy is and fix it, because he's the one that's defining your job. And I feel like in the world of education, oftentimes you're really only as good as your weak staff members are, because they're the ones that are defining you. And so you have to have a passionate, committed staff. They're the heart of your school. They're the face of your school. They're the engine of your school. That's who they are. And so, I'm a headmaster, and I talk and I do all kinds of stuff, but the kids and the parents don't see me every day. They see their teacher. And that third grade teacher in that class is the heart and the face and the engine of their experience. And that person has to be someone who is very committed to their job. And in our world, it's pretty typical that we don't pay as well as our public school partners do. And so how do we get great staff? Well, we have to recruit them. We have to give them a great environment to work in. We have to not overburden them with lots of different ancillary jobs. We have to give them the tools so they can just be teachers. And when you do that, people will come to you because they get to be teachers. They don't have to be managers, or they don't have to be paperwork pushers. They get to be teachers. And you got to find people that are passionate and love that and feel called by God to really pass truth on to the next generation. So a job of the head of school, of a good leadership team, is to find great, committed staff, because your school is only as good as they are. And you can have great facilities. You can have a great football coach. You can have lots of stuff, but if you don't have an overall great, committed staff, you're not going to grow as a school. It is going to hold you. And so you got to have that. So you have clear mission and vision. What can we talk about? And you got to have great staff, and spend the time recruiting, spend the time pursuing. And then in our world, and where I live right now in Lecanto, we're not an area that people would gravitate toward. When I was in Athens, Watkinsville is a better community of Athens, Georgia, less University of Georgia. And so we could get people to come to us just because we're near Athens, and that was a place where people wanted to live. Well, the truth is, people don't want to live in Lecanto, Florida. It's not the cool place like you live. It's just, we're over here on the nature coast. There's not a beach. It's kind of old Florida, which is cool, but it's not the kind of place that a lot of people want to come. And so we can attract. It's hard time attracting them. And so if you can't attract them, what you do is build them, make them. And so we do constant training. We do, and I'm not just talking about beginning of the year training, summer training. I'm talking about every Wednesday. Or we have a preschool, a grammar school, a high school, and the principals of each of those schools are using Wednesdays to do a lot of teaching, to do a lot of in-service, to help our teachers work through those. So we go through Doug Lemo's book, Teach Like a Champion, and we do different things with them along to help grow them ourselves. So we're looking for a great piece of clay that is teachable and moldable. And I'll tell you this, so far our most successful hires have been Christians that are teaching in the public school. And not because they come to us for a variety of reasons, but we don't bash the public school. We don't get anywhere doing that. But we got these people that are saying, I want I want something different. I see this differently. And then we start telling them who we are, and they're going, okay, I get that. And so we've been wildly successful with some great, passionate, committed staff that have come to us because they want something different, and then we get a chance to teach them. So we sort of take it on ourselves to train them, because in where we're at in Florida, we're not going to naturally get gifted people to come teach for us. We have to help make that. Yeah.
I got two questions for you on this one then. So
Right.
talking about, you mentioned recruiting. What are some things you guys are doing to recruit? You mentioned, okay, we're getting them from the public school. What are some other things you guys as a school are doing, or other schools are listening going, okay, he's talking about recruiting. What are some ways as me as a small Christian school or a small private school can recruit?
Well, I'll tell you what hasn't worked. All right. What hasn't worked is what you think would work. Like we would go visit Christian colleges, and we would go visit colleges where kids were at. We would advertise and play in places none of that worked. I would have told you, oh, try that, because it's like go where they are, but we haven't been successful in that. We've been mostly successful using our church, which is it's a wonderful church, and it's a good sized church. And so we will advertise through the church, and just about because it's a church of 1,500, 2,000 people, just about every time we advertise through the church, someone will come forward and say, I'm interested. And most of the time it's good. Maybe 80, 60, 70% of the time it really works well. And sometimes it doesn't, but we've been very successful through that. And then we've gotten a lot of staff members from our parent body. They're public school teachers who put their kids in our school, and then they see how our school runs, and they think, some point I'd like to get over there. And then, so they come through there. So it's probably more just touch points through the church and the community than it is in going to Christian colleges or visiting Hillsdale or, any of that kind of stuff. It's really just touch points. And and so it's a little bit more organic, and, a little bit more, and it is intentional. We make every effort, but it's a tad more organic than you might think it would be. And I would argue that any school, that's, if you in your Christian community, you're going to find people that are interested in learning.
You mentioned too, this thing that I know it's the talk of the country. I feel like when we're talking about private education, but specifically Christian education, which is teachers not getting paid as much as like the public school, the districts in their area. What would you say, because you've been in this for a while, what is the way that we can bridge that gap in that industry? Is we just have to raise tuition, and sorry, people, we have to do this so we can pay teachers the going rate when it comes to the public school? Like, what do you think the actual disconnect is?
It's probably a little bit of a lot of things, Mitchell. It's in other words, if you can say, let's raise tuition and pay everybody the same thing get paid. Well, that would be such a dramatic thing that it would impact your growth, and it would impact your sales faculty, and so you could reach a point of diminishing returns where the curve starts to go down instead of up. So you have to balance that. So, there is that element. And then something I've tried to do, and it's what we try to do, is how much can you do that doesn't cost you anything, that makes a teacher feel valued, makes them feel like a professional? What is it don't cost you anything? And so a lot of it is we treat them like professionals. We treat them like men and women who are well-trained, who are doing an honorable profession, who bring high value to not just our school, but to our community and to our world. You're doing a job that has high value, and you're doing a job that is very important to our culture. And so you really place a lot of value in what they do. And then all our duties are done by administrators, not teachers. So we don't burden them with duties. When somebody struggles in a life situation, we tend to be real flexible with leave time and those kinds of things. We in every way try to treat them as men and women who are deserving to be treated with grace and professionalism. And it works. We have about a 95% retention year in and year out. So a lot of that is just treating them like they matter. And so there are things you can do. Like just last night we had a Christmas party. Well, we went to a really nice place, had a really great meal, and then gave everybody a Christmas bonus. And we had a donor that just paid for the bonus. So it was a beautiful thing. but they're treated with such, you get to dress up, watch a really nice meal in a really beautiful place and be treated, with dignity and honor. And this is everybody. This is our custodians all the way up to our headmaster. Everybody treated exactly the same, and everybody given the same bonus. Everybody just enjoy, treated well and loved. And so I think this is where the culture matters. Just treat people like it matters. And it does. Yep.
And that's what we want. I mean, obviously, if I'm not feeling welcome, whether it's or go to a restaurant or go somewhere, if I don't feel loved and welcomed, I don't really want to go back there. So obviously, it's the same thing when you're at a place for over 40 hours a week. If you don't feel welcomed or loved or appreciated, you're going to most likely be looking elsewhere. So love that for number 2. What would be, what's number 3?
Number 3 is something is a business part. You have to have a product worth buying. I think as private schools who charge tuition, we have to be cognizant of a business model. We can't charge somebody for a product and deliver an inferior product. I'll be the first person to argue that education should be a partnership, not a consumer relationship. But at the same time, you can't present an inferior education and charge for it and then say, well, we're a Christian school, do the best we can. You're probably not doing the best you can. You need to have a product worth buying. You need to remind yourself, parents are paying for your services. And because they're paying, it matters. They must feel a real value in the education. In other words, what you're doing has to be noticeably and measurably different from somewhere else they could go. And if it's not noticeably and measurably different, and by measurably, Mitchell, I literally mean our test scores, indicate that we are doing the job we've been asked to do. And those things matter. So we publish our test scores. Here they are. This is where we are, because it has to be measurable. You can't accept or excuse poor results. If something's not working, fix it. Don't excuse it. And don't use ministry as a reason to offer poor education, because I'm not sure that's a biblical way to say, well, we love Jesus. I know you can't read, but at least we love Jesus. Well, we love Jesus and they can read. That's what it should be about. And so never use ministry as a reason for an inferior education. Offering a great product is the easiest way to keep school students you already have. And this is something I tell people. The easiest person you get to come to your school is somebody who's already coming. That, in other words, if somebody's coming to your school, they're the easiest people you get to come back every year because they're already there. Well, why do they come back? Well, they come back because there's a perceived value in what's being done. So I think headmasters, we need to be visionaries and we need to recruit good people. We also need to have a business mind. And the business mind is, are we providing a service that someone's willing to pay for? And you can't discount this. Your school should be able to communicate in almost an elevator speech who you are and what you do. I do this all the time. I go out in front of parents and I define our academic vision in just 3 quick, simple statements. Every third grader will be able to read on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. As it turns out, Mitchell, that's the most important statistic in American education. If you are reading on grade level at the end of 3rd grade in any school in America, not just any, your probability of graduating high school is significantly higher. Your probability of going to college is significantly higher. And your probability for success getting out of poverty is significantly higher. Any school in America, if you're reading on grade level at the end of 3rd grade. If you're not reading on grade level, there's a 70% chance you never will. It's the dividing point in education. And because it's the dividing point in education, we harp on it and we communicate it to parents and we publish our statistics so they see it. So that's the thing. The second thing is 8th grade. We say every 8th grader should be able to read at an advanced level so they can read college level textbooks in high school. They should be able to write a perfect paragraph, which, you think, what does that matter? Well, good spelling, good grammar, good structure, write a perfect paragraph, and they should be able to do mathematical computations with all numbers. Well, that's easy for people to understand. And you and I know that sets the foundation for now moving into the abstract world of high school. And then we get to high school, we say they should be able, they should be able to write well. They should be able to state their own ideas and argue those ideas well. They should be able to function at a very high level with mathematics and so forth. And so it becomes much more about who they are as a person going into college. And so we define that clearly. So I can give a quick elevator speech. This is who we are. And then people say, okay, are you getting there? And we have to measure it. How are your eighth graders reading? How are your 12th graders doing in college? How are your third graders doing? And I think that matters. And so it's a way that you define, this is who we are and this is how we do it. And, you got to be able to do it. So that's that.
Do you recommend then these schools for, talking about making a school worth buying, obviously a product worth buying, that you survey your families throughout the year to see like, where are they at? And are they interested in coming back? Is there things they're frustrated with that you can make better? Or do you guys do surveys right now?
We do a survey. We do a pretty regular survey, and in order to find that, and some of the things we think, like one of the big criticisms our parents have of us is, you guys have too much homework. And you can just kind of say, oh, we're an academic school, of course we have homework. But then if we investigated, which we did because it was a complaint, what we found out was that some of our teachers were giving unnecessary homework. And so we had to kind of go over with our teachers and say, what is an average fourth grader's homework should look like, and we said, well, they probably should be finishing a math assignment and they should be doing their own, everybody has personal reading. They should be reading personally, and then they maybe have a test to study for. On a typical day, this is what a fourth grade homework should look like. If you've got them doing 8 other assignments, you probably have gone overboard. And so that's listening to teachers, and listening to students, and listening to parents, and getting there. So yeah, we absolutely survey them. And this, that's one of the things that we hear is because you hope when you survey, everybody say, oh man, you guys are great. Well, sometimes they don't. Yeah.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out, classreach.com. Now, back to the show. Which is like, I'd rather you guys tell me so I can fix it than tell me in May when you're like, and we're not coming back, and you're like, oh my goodness, you told me earlier. Is there something that's like, if there was one thing you would say for the schools listening to go, oh man, I want to make our product worth buying? Is there one thing kind of stands out to go, do that? If you're not doing this one thing to make it better or make it worth buying, you should be doing this at least.
I tell people all the time that we are Seven Rivers Christian School. Seven Rivers is where we are. That's our geography. It's who we, and school is what we do, and Christian is who we are. And so I think the Christian who we are and the school what we do matter. And I think sometimes too many Christian schools will lessen the quality of education in order to sort of increase the Christian ministry. And I just don't fundamentally believe that has to be a choice. I feel like learning is an act of worship, that God created us with minds to learn, and he created us with minds that want to continue to learn. And so learning for us is a way to worship God. Learning for God created children's minds to be these vacuums that just take in gigantic amounts of information. And so learning for them is the way they were designed. And we need to take advantage of that. So I feel like you have to major on the majors, and the major is your school. Don't lose track of the fact that you're a school. So reading, writing, arithmetic, and recess matter. It just does. And so major, if your kids aren't reading on grade level, you're wasting your time. If you're not doing mathematics, if you're not teaching mathematics, and you understand the journey from concrete thinking to, to abstract thinking, you're wasting your time. You got to tackle those things. And in so many schools, we sort of talk a little bit about the education being such a knee-jerk profession. What we do in America is we sort of let the textbooks decide curriculum. And so what it means fundamentally is that in America, Texas and California decide what's taught, because those are the big student markets in our country. And those are what the textbook authors design books that California will buy and that Texas will buy. And so whatever California and Texas think, that's what textbooks are doing. And I step back and think, okay, well, maybe they're doing good things, maybe they're not, but how do you know? You got to have your own philosophy of great reading. And, reading's gone through this whole thing of, whole language and phonics. And now the big term is the science of reading, which in all honesty, Mitchell, the science of reading is what we were doing 50 years ago. It's teaching phonics, it's teaching decoding skills, it's teaching all the skills that help make you a good reader. It's learning vocabulary. It's the science of reading. And I feel like as a school, it's like major on the things you're supposed to do: reading, writing, arithmetic. And then I always had recess, because I think play is a good thing to do at school too. So reading, writing, arithmetic, and recess, and then you'll be great.
I 100% agree with that last one, because I told my wife, we homeschool our kids, and I said, I'm in charge of Bible teaching and PE, or recess. That's why I get playtime with Dad. And I know that kids work way better when they're moving and they're getting active. I remember specifically, because I was homeschooled my whole life, I remember my mom doing flashcards for multiplication tables or phonics, and we would go to the trampoline and I would jump, and it'd be like 4 times 4 is 16. And I just do that because she knew we had to keep moving as boys. Like, we could not be sitting still. And I know that's
fantastic. Yeah.
And I know that's hard in school, because they're sitting at desks for all day long. Like, they need to be moving.
We try to help our teachers understand recess is a necessary part of the school day, and so use it. So we have PE classes and stuff, but, recess and breaks for upper school, those are necessary parts of the school to let kids let some steam off and work.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, what's your fourth one? 4 of your 4. What's the last one here?
Is, visionary, humble, stable leadership. I've already talked about visionary a little bit. The stable part is the big deal in this, because the average life of a headmaster in this country is 5 years. And then the guy leaves after 3 to 5 years, new guy comes in, he's got his own set of ideas. He starts those, leaves after 3 to 5 years, new guy comes in. One of the things about me is in addition to my school, I'm the executive director of the Christian School of Florida, which is an accrediting organization of about 35 schools. So I've been at my school 16 years. I'm now the longest serving head of school in all of those 35 schools.
Wow.
And that means that, and some schools have had 4 headmasters or 5 headmasters over that time. And these schools, they struggle, because a lot of when I'm talking about these things I'm talking about, getting a committed staff, having a clear vision, building your education program to meet goals and stuff, this doesn't happen in a year. This happens building a great curriculum is a 5 to 10 year project. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of training. It's a lot of work. And, you can't do that without stable leadership. And I would say that from my seat, it's this biggest problem that I see in Christian education is the turnover in leadership, and the instability that creates in a school. And so, because every time you have a turnover in leadership, it's like you have to start over with vision, with passion, with a product refined. It's like you have to start all over again. And certainly turnover in leadership is fine, but you'll find that a stable school that's had a headmaster for 15 years, which is unusual, when they turn over, they're looking for somebody that fits their DNA, and when you're turning people over every 3 to 5 years, you don't even get a chance to know what your DNA looks like. I don't know what my DNA looks like. And so, and so that never happens. And so I think that really matters. And so stable matters, humble matters. And this is probably a good place for us to just kind of sort of wrap it up, but I think the greatest character quality in any leader is simply humility. And humility causes us to listen to other people. Humility causes us to really lead and care about an organization instead of making it about ourselves and our own accomplishments. Humility enables us to celebrate the accomplishments of other people in our organization. It enables us to work with other people, enables us to listen. It's so important to just be humble. I tell people, sometimes people think a headmaster is omniscient and omnipotent and, we're none of those things. We're just a guy, or a girl. And I tell kids all the time, the only thing I have on you is 50 years. That's what I have on. I've just been doing this longer, and because I've had some experience and I've experienced things, but you're on the same path I'm on, and we'll get there together. And I just feel like if you just don't take yourself too seriously and you're humble and listen to people and love people, that it really works well. So
you made a really good point on the year thing about like 3 to 5 years, and the person comes in, they bring their own vision, mission, all that stuff. There's a guy I interviewed. I don't even think this episode's aired yet as we're recording this. He had been at the school. I think he's either the first or he's the second ever head of school for this school. He's been there 30 or 40 years at this one school. And they did the same thing what you just said. They're looking for somebody to fit the exact DNA because the school is thriving.
They know what the DNA is, and that's a big deal. They know what it is. They can articulate it.
And they're being very picky about who it is. And they're having him help select the person because they just know who they are. And I'm like, that, and it's stability for the parents and the kids and all that to go, oh, cool. We've had the same guy, great school, great culture. Like, you don't want to, man, can you imagine the wrong person coming in and it just completely flipped on its head?
Absolutely.
That's good. I got 2 final questions for you before we close it out for the day. The first one, you mentioned in our pre-interview call from, I know, a few months ago. I just thought nobody had ever broken it down like you did, and I really liked it. So I know putting you on the spot, but you talked about size of school for like different sizes. I'm not going to be able to articulate it well. I think you know what I'm saying. Hey, when you get to this size, you're going to need to have this many people, and this many is where you probably need to stop, or you're going to need to build a new building or hire new things. Can you break down that?
It's 300, 600, 900, 1200. And at 300, it's fundamentally one section per grade. And to get to 300 is a financially stressful time. But from 300 to 400, it's kind of a really sweet zone where where the money's come in, you're comfortable, and you got the right, and you can really thrive in that. If you decide, we're going to grow, then you got to commit to go to 600. 600 is 2 sections per grade. And you got to hire staff, you got to build buildings, you got to do all this stuff. And again, that's a stressful time. When you get to 600, and this is where my school was, arrived about 3 years ago. So you got to 600, then you're kind of in this financial sweet spot again, where you can pay your bills, you can cover everything. You're not having to add personnel as the next 100 kids come in. And it's really a healthy place for a school to be. And so we started the conversation of going from 600 to 900, which I call the $10 million conversation. And actually it's now $15 million conversation. And because we have to build a high school. And so, so it's like, if we're going to go to 900, then you got to have the $15 million conversation. And so 3 years ago, we started having the conversation. We'll break ground here in a couple of months. And, but we had to bring our whole organization in to get to this level. It's a big conversation. So I think growth, you have to understand growth in tiers, because it's just like our school is growing, and you keep thinking, why, if this school is 800 kids, why are they struggling financially? It's because they didn't have, that conversation of what's it going to take to get to 900? How are we going to get there? And what's it going to be? And it's just sobering conversation, because when we started it, I said, we need to stay where we're at, 600-700. If we're going to go to 900, we have to commit and do it, and build that school and hire the staff we need, and then have the marketing to get to 900 to 1,000 kids so we can pay for this. And that's the business model comes out, and that's the business part of this. And it matters.
I love that breakdown, because I just feel like until you broke it down that first time, I was like, I think there's probably a lot of schools out there like, let's just grow. Let's just let God do what he wants to do in the school. It's like, there's a piece of that. Yes. But we also want to be good stewards of what he's given us and making good financial decisions.
So, oftentimes we think growing to 300 kids is the hard part. it's just as hard going from 600 to 900 as it is from 0 to 300. It's the same effort, and you just have to be aware of it.
It's good. Thank you for breaking that down. My last question for you. I usually ask this at the beginning for everybody, but we kind of just jumped right in and I forgot. So here's the last question you got. So if I was to visit you in Lecanto, Florida, which I've never been to Lecanto, Florida, what would you say, Mitchell, you need to eat this and do this to experience Lecanto, Florida?
We are Lecanto, Florida. The city of Crystal River is right here in our county, and it is the world's best place to see manatees. And when I say see manatees, I don't mean you walk and you might see a manatee. I mean, it's like going to a cow pasture and hundreds of manatees come by. It's not even in other words, if you've never seen a manatee, come here and see 1,000 of them. It's just, they're crazy in the number. And so people come from all over the world to go to Three Sisters Springs to see the manatees. So that's it. As far as eating, probably my favorite restaurant is a place called the Seafood Cellar, which is actually it's just at a shopping center, an old shopping center thing. It doesn't look like much, but they serve a Cajun seafood, and it is the best. Great. And then there's another place called the Crab Plant, which is literally on Kings Bay. And the crab plant is so cool. Every time there's a hurricane, it just completely floods. But they designed the building where there's a drain in the middle. And so they just come in there, hose it down, pressure wash it, Clorox it, clean it, open up 3 days later, and they keep going. And they serve amazing seafood. So those are two places that you'd want to go. Yep.
I love it. Well, I've enjoyed this episode. I've enjoyed just learning from you. And I just want to say thank you for all your years in education. You've been doing some awesome stuff. Wishing you guys nothing but the best to build this $15 million building and grow the school to the 900,000 student mark.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. So thank you for speaking to our guests and to myself today, Dana.
Okay, sure thing.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Dana for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing over at Seven Rivers Christian School, and I'm wishing him nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate the next generation that's coming behind us. They got a big building they're building to get to that next 900 to 1,000 students. So they got a lot of growth ahead, and really excited to see what God has in store for them over there in Florida. But as always, guys, hoping you're able to take at least one thing away from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And there is a lot in today's episode. So as always, if you need to, just go back and re-listen to it. Listen to it on 1.5 speed if you have to. That's my favorite podcast hack to do when I'm listening to podcasts. If you need to, go back and do that. But before you go for today, I do want to make sure you are aware of our 3 free resources we have available here at School Success. The first one is, of course, the School Success podcast that you're listening to right now. We're dropping episodes every single Monday morning, and we want to make sure you're not missing any of them. We spend a lot of time and effort to put these together to help you be more successful. So I would love you to be listening to them every single week. Subscribe for free. And if you love the content, we would love a 5-star review. And you can do that. Pause it right now and go do that right now if you haven't done that before. The second free resource is on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. Top right-hand corner is a button, School Success Report. That is emailed directly to your inbox every single week with different articles the team has either found or written just for you to help you, a school leader, be more successful. We want to make sure you're not missing out on that as well. There's some fun stuff in store for you if you haven't gotten that before. So make sure you are subscribed. And then last but not least is our free Facebook community called School Success Makers. If you're not yet in there, you're missing out. Go over there and join, get to know other school leaders in the space as well. I'm personally in there. Would love to see you in there as well and get to know you and your school and what you got going on for the rest of your school year. And I think that's it. So we will be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.